Evening, everybody.
Hey, Bill. Hey, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hey everyone. Wow, man, looks like Bob's on the beach.
In a different time zone, Bob, because it's a little dark here.
I know. I
Beautiful
wish.
sunset.
Jealous.
So we're going to get much snow the next couple of days?
Nah, a couple inches is all. At least that's the latest I heard.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Although I did see maybe some icing down in New Canaan, to finish it off. So that's always bad. The snow you can live with. The ice, that's a problem.
Definitely.
Hey, Trina, is someone letting people in from the waiting room? Because Jen said she's still holding to be let in.
Oh, let me text her because I was waiting and then I went out and came back in and it worked. Deanna, I think you did the same thing, right? Yeah.
All right.
I did the
I
same
can
thing,
text
so
her.
she should write. Yeah.
Sherry, I like how you're showing your feelings for all of us on your
It
So do you
sounds
want to
good.
be like a sportscaster or a disc
Right? I look
jockey
really
or
professional.
Yeah, or air traffic control. You get to choose the occupation.
I can hear you.
That's good.
We
I
can.
guess.
Bring those planes in, Jen.
Oh, goodness.
Bring the planes in with love.
That's right.
Good. So Jen, that works then. You can that headset
Yes.
work. Excellent. Very
Well, as long
good.
as you can hear me. I always can hear you guys. I don't know. Hopefully you won't be able to hear all my dogs barking and all that too.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect.
Good. All right. My apologies. I know I'm running a few minutes late. Literally, DPH call ended at 7:00 exactly. We were. Matt Carter was there, so he was getting into some more details about some of the science of it all. And last week there was a joint call with local health and some superintendents that we were invited to, where Matt was talking about potentially going back into shutdown as a state because of the new variant and UK being in shutdown and what's happening. And it really sort of was just dissonant given where we are and what we've been working to do and how we feel about how everything's going and the mitigation strategies and all. So it was an opportunity to get some clarity from him about all of that and to go back and forth. So I apologize. All right.
Good.
So then I had to feed my dogs because they were hungry. All right. So I think we are good. So we have Dave Gussich is going to give us a bit of a short 5-minute update just on COVID over at Saks, as we talked before about doing that with individual people, right? I think Matt Kaskak maybe next week. Okay.
Okay.
Are we here? I think we got everybody.
Everyone's here.
All right. Let's go live. There we go. All right, let's give it a moment for the attendees to come in. It just takes a minute. Okay.
All right.
Take it away.
Started. like to call to order the January 25th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First tonight, I'd like to approve the minutes from the January 11th meeting. Is there a motion? Sherry, second. Deanna, all in favor? Okay. Next is to review and approve our agenda for this evening. Motion. Jen, second. Penny, all in favor? Okay. Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. And if there's anyone wishing to address the board, please use the raise hand feature. I see that someone is there. And Dr. Lutzy will move you over. I think you're on mute.
I am. I apologize. It's we may get some dog barking in the background from time to time. Let me see here. James, I believe you can now speak.
All right. Thank you.
There we go.
I guess we're at it. We're back again. I just want to make some kind of things clear. Maybe you, the board and the administration can make it clear for me. I don't believe that this plan is any different from the plan that was submitted last year. I know you guys, you can't respond, but it might help, I guess, the people out there to know that if this plan has changed significantly, what those changes are. And if it has not changed at all, I think they'd like to know that as well. I think some of the issues we have with this plan is, I think you heard all through last year. So I think some of our concerns remain because the plan remains the same. One of the differences this year is, and again, I know you can't respond, but I think the budget this year is up 5.3% from last year. Now, I acknowledge that much of that is due to COVID. So outside of that, I don't know what the increase is, but saving $1 million should definitely help bring that down. Now, I know you have it listed as $460,000, but correct me if I'm wrong, that's just splitting it between 1 year and the other. The price tag remains the same, does it not? Again, I know you can't respond, but if you made that clear, that would help as well. Price tag is change or not change. The plan is changed or not change. If you would make that clear, I think a lot of people might have a better idea of what this plan essentially is. The other thing is, I think members and admin have said that they want to hear what the community says, what parents are concerned about. But despite I guess the surveys, petitions, it doesn't seem like we're being heard because, again, this plan seems like the same plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I would love to hear that the plan has changed some, but I don't believe it has. Now, I applaud Dr. Lutzy. He mentioned that he was looking at some potential alternatives, maybe some block scheduling or some other alternatives that might help high school students get more sleep. And I'm all in favor of that. That might be a much better option in that it saves potential harm, we feel, to the youngest learners in our community. In addition, it might be a fairly cost-effective way to do something to allow high school students to get more sleep. I'm hoping that the board can kind of respond to some of the questions and clarify some of this in the discussion today. Let's see. I just want to remind the board also that a number of towns, as you've indicated, have changed their schedules, and none of those towns have done so at the expense of their youngest. And with that, I appreciate your time, and I hope to hear more greater clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. We'll lower hand here, and Jennifer is next. Okay, Jennifer, yep, you should be also.
Thank you so much. It's been a while since I've seen everyone, and it's wonderful to see everybody's faces. So I want to say first, thank you for the extraordinary job you've done. My children being in school are the delight of their day and ours. It is truly a gift. As I talk to friends across the country, as well as our neighboring towns that so continuously, I'm a little less prepared today, so my words lose me. Just very consistent. Thank you that we're in school, and it proves just how hard this board and the administration can tackle and works on complex issues. This is beyond a difficult subject. And so it astounds me, we are still here. And from what I understand, with the same start time solution that we've had a year ago, I understand there's been little time to think about it differently. But that we can't solve that. And we've heard loud and clear that the health and well-being of our students, and that's all of our students, and Dr. Lutzy made that quite clear on one of the PTC calls recently, are number one at the front of what you do every day. And it's certainly been proven in this past year. Thank you, Dr. Lutzy, in one of the meetings answering a question I had that getting all students to school between 8 and 9 is 1.7 million. It's a number we hadn't heard, and at least there's something to work from. So I appreciate being transparent about that. And that is without negotiations, RFPs, and other things. That is approximately, I believe, 2% of our budget. It's about a net of 1% of our budget. So if we can do it, if we can truly deliver all our children the best start times from kindergarten on through between 8 and 9 for 2% of our entire budget with a net of 1%, you're telling me we can't find, after what you have done this whole year, that 1%. I'm not saying our budget is the best use. If I know there are a lot of detractors on the increases for this year, but just pointing out that if it's the health and well-being, we should be able to find it. The other towns have, and their budgets are no less complex. I've managed a budget this big. It is not easy, but it can be done, especially 1% across the rest. I just ask you to please go back and think about all the people who have written, who have called, the petitions, where we were with the budgets a year ago, and try to consider the health and well-being of all of our students, looking at the science that we have across all students. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else wishing to address the board? Okay, I don't see anyone. So we will move on. Oh.
Yep, there's.
Hand just went up. Sorry.
Okay, Anne, I think you're all set, although I believe you're on mute. There you go.
Hi, it's Ann Shimek, and I guess I just wanted to also say thank you for all you all have done for my family, our children, all of the students this year. It is really incredible how many days of in-person school we've had. And honestly, it has just benefited my children tremendously. So I wanted to start by saying thank you. As you know, I definitely feel strongly about the start time issue. I am so thrilled it's in the budget this year. I know there are certainly differing opinions among elementary parents. I have 2 children still at South, and I feel that this is a great solution for them. I wish, it had been in place years ago too. It certainly would benefit our teens. And I just feel that it's well aligned with when everyone learns best. The South students and the teachers we've heard from have definitely been supportive of that. The other thing I just wanted to specifically mention is a good friend of mine moved from New Canaan to Dover, Sherburne, Massachusetts last year. They start their elementary at 7:50 so that their high school could start later. And it has been a great success. She has been thrilled to death. So I guess I just wanted to chime in and say, there are other districts that have a schedule similar to what's been proposed. And I really applaud the work that's been done for years and years. And I think, to continually be asked to go back to the drawing board because it doesn't make everyone happy is a difficult situation. And at some point, we just need to move forward with what we know it follows the science and is best for the kids in our district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so reports and recognition. Tonight we have another COVID-19 update with Dr. Lutzy, the cabinet, and our guest, Mr. Gussich.
Yep, and Mr. Gussich should pop onto the screen at any moment. There he is. Very good. I'll give a brief update and then share the sharing rights with Principal Gussich here, who will give us just a little more specific information about how things are going over at Saks and get a little window into some of what the school day is like for our students and staff over there. at a high level for us, today we began the hybrid plus at the high school, which means that 3/4 of our students came into school, and they will be in school 75% of the time instead of about 50% of the time. So we're increasing the density a little bit. We feel that this is the right time to do it, given that our numbers have really trailed down since the week after the holidays. That week after the holidays, we were looking at a high number. We were just here in town about 80 positive cases. Since the next week, though, it came down to the 60s. Last week, it was only around in the 30s. And this week, we're off to a good start, too. So going remote worked for that peak, but now we've seen things going in the right direction here locally. So we made the decision to bring in Hybrid Plus, and by all accounts, our students were very happy to be there. And so, again, instead of being in 2 groups, now they're in 4, and on two days at a time, we'll have students rotating out. So the students who did not come to school today will come in on Wednesday, and then they'll be there for 5 days, actually 6 days, and then out for 2, and how that works. So anyway, not to belabor the point, but we made that shift. It's working well. The other thing, just as a reminder, the reason we structured our cohorts the way we did was to really limit cross exposures. And I mentioned before, I was just on with the DPH and the SDE talking about what they've been learning from some different case studies at schools around the state. And that cohorting continues to work, but it works best when you have a positive case in a cohort that you do quickly and instantly quarantine the close contacts within that cohort. Quarantining works. So we're going to obviously continue using the system as we put it together and the strategies that we put together to keep everybody safe. The vaccine, as you know, we are watching closely with the timing of the rollout. The most recent information we have is they anticipate getting to the essential workers for 1B in early March. So we're keeping a close eye on that. And same goes with sorry about the dogs. Same goes with the variants that we are learning about, the South Africa, what's going on in California, what the UK. DPH is watching that closely, and they're going to continue to report out what they find. It's the most strong recommendations and guidance from DPH continues to be strict adherence to the mitigation strategies. Implement them with fidelity, strongly, do them, devote yourself to getting this right. And that will help take care of things going in the wrong direction. We're doing that in our schools. We're going to keep doing it. Janet, Jen, and others are a great team. So we continue on. And with that, Principal Gussich, I believe I gave you sharing rights to the screen. And why don't you give us a little bit of info about SACS?
Great, thank you. Let me just transition over here. And I'll go to my present button. Hopefully, there we go. All right, good evening to everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and give you a quick COVID update. I know that I was just with you not too long ago, last month, as we went through the budget workshop. And I talked a little bit about certainly the challenges that have been part of this year, but we have so much to be proud of and grateful for. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've continued to evolve and adapt to these difficult situations. I framed this quick overview through the lens of our 5 C's, 3 of which you see at the top of the screen there. And a lot of this is just going to show the growth that we have continued to make over the course of this year. And that, we continue to be at the forefront of what we do and how we're doing it. And that, truly, we feel very strongly that our students are exactly where they need to be. We couldn't be more grateful for the time that we've had with them in front of us, in person, with the in-person learning since going back to the beginning of the school year, with very few exceptions to that. And one example of some of the ways that we have been adapting, we kicked off our first official virtual daytime open houses today, and they're off to a pretty good start. And we're certainly learning as we go, but we've certainly received some positive parent feedback from that. And I think a lot of what I'm going to share with you this evening is going to show that our planning for today is certainly helping us not only every step of the way now, but into the future as we look at what the ideal middle school is and how we can continue to maximize our students' experience here at Sachs Middle School as we focus on each domain of the critical part of growth during the middle school years. So again, I've used some pictures to help describe the student experience here. And again, framing that under our 5 C's, you could see at the top there, top left, our charter words, continue to be a focal point for us. Our students have spoken, and across the board, our student charter this year includes being comfortable, happy, included, respected, and safe. And you'll see a shot of the signs that are going to be going up or have already been put up in every classroom in the building. And on the bottom left there is one of our health, actually a 5th grade health class, including some of that social emotional work, which certainly is the foundation of all that what we do and is embedded in a lot of what we do, not only with our students, but with our staff as well. In terms of communication, I referenced our daytime open houses. You could see here, this is actually an example from this morning. We try and stay as timely as possible. I was speaking with a teacher last week, and she shared that she was going to be doing an interactive activity with our library media specialist. And this 8th grade language arts class, I was able to go in and view the students working on their projects. And this particular student happened to be in a breakout room Zooming with our library media specialist and talking about citations, talking about different resources, all while the rest of the class was continuing to work and the teacher was able to circulate and assist students. And there was a great breakout where students got to sign up for certain slots. They had that time, and then they went back to their project, and the next student stepped up to work with our library media professional. So just the one example there. On the right, you could see our commitment to all of the experiences for our students. Here is a quick shot of physical education and kicking off their official dance unit, which is well received by a lot of our students. Self-admittedly, our teachers went out of their comfort zone this year and they produced their own video, which they were very proud of. Here's an example of them showing our students how they did it, and then let them, our students, be creative to take off and come up with their own way to do that as well. And on the bottom right is our one of our orchestra classes. I am very open and honest to them that I certainly have an untrained, untuned ear, but every time I hear them, I think it sounds wonderful, and I always pop in to hear them, even when they're warming up and doing their scales. It's just wonderful to hear the sounds echoing down the halls, and everybody has been so adaptive as they have made the best of the situation. Last but not least, in the middle, on the bottom, I wanted to share that we're certainly continuing to be receptive to all of our learners. This happens to be one of our visually impaired students who, over the weekend, our art teacher sent me a picture of this and showed me a new tool that was provided to our student, where she's able to draw on what appears to be an Etch-a-Sketch there, but as she is drawing, whatever she draws then raises, so she's able to feel it in a sense of a braille through that drawing. And to see the teacher's face light up as she shared that experience for this student, and us, looking forward to seeing what that means for this student moving forward. I'm sure that's something I'm going to be sharing out with you in the future as well. But these are things that we had not, even dreamed of in the past that are now really part of our daily operations here. As we go to our last slide here and taking a look at celebrating our learning community, this is something that, a quick snapshot, one of our 7th grade social studies teachers, Mr. Devine, there with one of his remote classes on a Zoom there, giving the thumbs up as they're all interacting with and amongst each other. And then the one I want to close with on the right there is our 8th grade orchestra class interacting on the smartboard up front. You probably can't tell, but it's Mr. Fix over at the high school. It's a real-time integrated class where Ms. Dorfman and Mr. Fix have their classes participating, playing together, and then they had an opportunity to do a Q&A with the high school students. So this, this stuff we could have dreamed of in the past is now a reality. And it's one of the benefits that we get to have as we walk through the halls and see our students doing school, really well every day. And it's something that each day is a gift, and we're grateful for all of these opportunities that come along with the interaction and teaching and learning and growing and socializing that takes place with being in school in person. I certainly want to thank Dr. Lutzy and the entire cabinet, as well as obviously the Board of Education for everything you have done to support, what I just kind of shared with you in a brief glimpse oversight or overview of, what it is to operate in the middle of a pandemic and still have our students, really feeling like they're in school and learning and growing every single day. So with that, I went a little bit longer than expected, but I certainly want to open it up to any questions that you may have. And, I'll be happy to share anything more in depth that you'd like to hear about.
Questions or comments? Brendan.
Thanks, Dave. I thought that was excellent. I guess just one question. Do you get the sense that it certainly seems like it based on your presentation, but do you get the sense that the buy-in that you're getting from both students and faculty is going to be lasting from a technology standpoint? We're going to end up using some of the tools we're using this year going forward.
Absolutely, Brendan. Thank you for raising that question because, one of the things we've talked about is the exponential growth that our staff has made through the professional learning, not only leading up to this school year, but on the weekly meetings that we have and the focus that we've had in the integration of technology in every single aspect of school. Our team, our tech integrators, our DTS team, all of our tech staff has been critical and crucial in terms of that success. They have been available. They've pushed into classes. They've obviously been the ones who have been, critical in all the training and professional learning that has taken place. But that has gotten us to a point that it's not just getting us through what we're doing now. It has really created a new way to look at education in terms of how we're interacting, not only with and amongst each other in school, similar to that 8th grade language arts, screen on the first one, but also locally, regionally, nationally, and globally. Some of the things that we've been able to, consider how things fit into our curriculum and the resources that we'll have at our fingertips to be able to provide experiences for kids that we wouldn't have had before. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going to keep growing as we go through here. And it's only going to be, I don't see us going back to how we were in any way, shape, or form, to be perfectly honest.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Yes.
Jenny.
So, in terms of like our budgeting for next year, or I'm looking past to the year after that, when we get beyond the pandemic, what do you think, what ideas do you have so far that you think we need to do to continue this development and sort of expansion? So we don't sort of just go back to our old and lose all the momentum that we've had and that we're able to develop with our Wednesday afternoons.
So I'll start that, and if certainly Dr. Lutzy or Dr. Coretti want to add in on any things that would add to that, but I certainly feel as though some of the long-range planning that has already been put into effect, some of the technology needs that will help support the curriculum are going to be what we're going to continue to look at. So it's not about just getting tech and tools into the hands of our students. It's about getting the right tech and the right tools into the hands of our students at the appropriate level. So each grade level may have certain needs that align with and support the curriculum. And that's how we're going to continue to approach this, to make sure that the experiences that our students have not only are supported by that technology, but really enrich it and provide that deeper experience that they wouldn't be able to have without that technology.
I would simply add you mentioned the professional learning that we've had, right? The opportunities to learn on Wednesdays. That's that learning. What teachers are working on, they're applying right away, by next day or two. So they really are getting that. They're learning and applying right away, and it's a cycle of continuous growth. But the real sort of change will come, I think, it's the behavior first as they learn and they try new ways. And then reflecting on that themselves and talking through and looking at how it all gets integrated and understanding that too. So we're also through our teacher evaluation system and other things looking at where do we embed the reflection and the opportunity for our staff to really think about where I am now versus where I was before, because we're all in action mode, right? And if you're always in action mode, you're just jumping from one thing to the next to the next. So we're embedding reflection into the practice. We always do in our evaluation, but we're staying true to that, to try to encourage folks to pause, take a step back, and really recognize the enormity of what we've been doing and all of what we've sort of done together to get to where we are, so that they will continue to learn and to apply what's going on.
Terrific. Thank you.
I just want to commend and thank you and the entire team and faculty at Saks. I think, you've all done a phenomenal job. I think it's so gratifying to see how much of the social emotional curriculum that's been put into place over the last couple of years is really providing a great level of support from what I can tell. And I'm a huge fan of your newsletters. I think it's so important in this times where we can't access a school, and it's just hard to imagine what the days look like. And I think, like you did tonight, just all the photographs and the pictures and the storytelling, it brings to life what's actually happening in our schools. And it's really reassuring and just amazing, truly, to see the amount of progress and change that has taken place over this year, and how our students are continuing to learn, and, just the resilience and everything that they, show every day is really incredible. So thank you.
Thanks, Katrina. I appreciate that. And I just want to add on to it. I want to share that not only do I want to thank the administrative team that I work with, our entire staff and faculty. When we do meet, we have brief staff meetings each week. And, that's always that we kind of call the kudos for colleagues. And we do celebrate each other as well, because it's important for us to continue to pick each other up and make sure that we understand that we're all part of this team. And we used a quote last week that, really captured the essence of what we're going through. That, we're open and honest. This is not easy. This is a challenge for everybody, but we're in it together. And, I always make sure that sincere thanks and gratitude goes out to our staff, and that it's heartfelt. And even though I let them know, I say, listen, I know I say this every week, guys, but this is something that you need to hear, because it's important, because what you're doing and the service you're providing for our kids is, it really is, it's impressive. And, and I'm so proud that we're able to do that for our kids here, and also for the families in the community.
Great. Thank you.
As you can tell, it wasn't easy for Mr. Gusich to get this down to 5 minutes. So thank you, Dan.
Sorry, I went a little over.
A lot to talk about, but now you did great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the COVID front, Dr. Lutzy?
A million and one things.
Yeah.
But, I'm glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, I think maybe we should transition into budget.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So our big action item tonight is to approve or review the second read and approve the budget. Before we move into that, though, I know, thank you all for submitting your questions. And I think we should take a moment and just review, answer any additional questions and review some of the questions that have come in. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Lutzy and Dr. Keating to kick us off.
Okay, I am glad to sort of start a little bit. And I think that Brendan, as member of the Resources Committee, also may have an exhibit to walk through as well. There were a couple of questions that came in that we sent back. Let's see. So we do want to remind everyone about the budget itself. Oh, Tracy just reminded me not to forget about her. See that? Sorry, Trace.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on here. There you go. It's best to talk about budget with our budget director in the room.
While you move over, I just the thank you spreadsheet that Brendan put together, I think just helps address a lot of some of the questions that came in. So we can go get to that.
Do you want me to walk through that as a starting point, and then we can kind of circle back?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay.
So I think you all got it by email, but Dr. Lutzy, you think you could put it on the screen? Does that work? Great. So I just put this one page together to try to, capture what is, complex year-to-year comparison. With all the puts and takes around COVID and the Internal Services Fund. I thought kind of trying to get it onto one page would be a good thing to do. So what this does is it looks at first line here is the current year 2020-2021 adopted budget. So the Town Council Board of Finance approved budget. And this puts to the side whether we've spent money or not within that budget, because obviously COVID is materially impacting this year. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. And what this does is it says, because of the fact that 2021's budget, this year's budget, when we approved it last year, when Town Council and Board of Finance approved it and was adopted last year, didn't include COVID-related expenses. So this was, Canaan Public Schools kind of run rate, regular operations. So that's the starting point. And then to bridge, there are a few major items. So first is the $909,000 of COVID expenses that are in the 21-22 budget, which is on page 19 in the budget book. The next is $1.4 million of an increase in the Internal Services Fund contribution, which I'll walk through at the bottom, which requires kind of its own explanation, but I'll walk through that. The start and end time change, which is $463,000. And then really a plug number is other, which is the $1.74 million to get to the total gross 21-22 budget that's been proposed, which is the 95.4. So those are kind of the major buckets. Before I go on, any questions on that? Okay. So to explain the other changes, putting aside COVID, the Internal Services Fund, and the start and end time changes, which I think are all, explained separately, and I'll go through number 3. I'll go through the Internal Services Fund. Putting those aside, the other changes are $1.7 million. $1.7 million represents, as a percentage of the prior year, 1.92%. And then excluding Internal Services Fund, it's 2.15%. So that takes out COVID, takes out Internal Services Fund, and it takes out the start and end time changes. That's kind of our baseline budget. So to explain the other changes, you go to row 9, and that row 9 is just the contractual salary plus step increases, including kind of a placeholder for negotiations, which is $2 million. So if you look at that $2 million compared to the 1.742 of the other changes, the 2%, that means that things other than contractual salary increases, step, grid progression, are saving us $265,000. So everything other than, salary is saving us $265,000. Which, by the way, that's pretty consistent with what we've seen over the last, as far as I can remember, 3 to 4 years. We've seen essentially savings in the budget from things like energy and, some insourcing, maintenance, those kinds of things to offset salary increases. Any questions? Okay. So this is probably the most difficult to understand, the number 3 here, which is explaining the increase in the contribution to the Internal Services Fund. And please stop me if this gets a little dense, but the line number 12 is last year's, or I should say this current year, 2021, internal services fund contribution from the budget. So $9.75 million. Because of experience leading up to the beginning of this school year, so through June 30th of last year, of 2020, the fund actually started the year better than what we expected, to the tune of $2.2 million. So the reason that's a negative number is because since it did better, that would then make our contribution for next year lower. So it reduces the contribution number. Then you look at this current year's projected benefits and negative results as compared to the original budget. So as a result of COVID, we're not getting a $200,000 contribution from Food Services Fund. And then there are a few other changes on the revenue side. So that means we have to contribute more to the tune of $241,000. But we're also seeing lower net expenditures, which is slightly better claims experience. So that reduces our net contribution to the tune of $550,000. So that's everything up until the beginning of the next fiscal year, up until June 30th, 2021. And then we look at actuarially speaking, and this comes from Joe Spurgeon's work. What do we need to do to meet our policy? So row 16 is just based on experience. Excuse me, Joe would say we'd need to be up 1.22%. So I've applied that number to the projected claims for this year, which is 160 grand. As he talked about last week in our resources committee meeting, the COVID adjustment, which is an expectation that we're going to have essentially deferred procedures and other uses of healthcare services moved into next year. That's $1.2 million. That's 9.3%, which is a little over $1 million. The actuarial cost trend, this is something that we see every year. It's just healthcare cost inflation. And what he's used is 8.99% annualized, which, because of the fact he's forecasting out for so many months, aggregates to 15.9%. So that's another almost $2 million. The budgeted stop loss insurance increase is $265,000. And then everything else to get to the aggregate budgeted internal services fund contribution is $368,000. So the increase to the internal services fund year over year is really completely explained by if you look at rows 17 and 18, which are assumptions around COVID pushing out costs into next year, and then the actuarial healthcare cost trend, which we see every year. That's something in Joe's numbers every year. And the hope / expectation is that as we roll things forward, right, that row 18 comes down. And our hope also is that, row 17 will mean that we'll be lower or, potentially zero. But those are really the reason that we're seeing the internal services fund be higher than where we were last year. So if we go back to the top, well, why don't I pause there? Are there questions on the internal services fund piece of this?
Penny?
So I guess one of the things I just wanted to have somebody speak to, this is incredibly helpful analysis, and I appreciate how you've taken this entire budget and sort of simplified it for us. So that, the internal services fund over the years is very much of a seesaw number. because we're a self-insured district. But if overall, being a self-insured district has saved us millions of dollars. And so, like, for example, last year, because of COVID, claims at the end of the year plummeted. And so we actually had that extra balance. I think, that most of it is the 2.2 million on line 13 that Brendan has there. And that went back to the benefit of the district and the town. It was money that we didn't spend. So I just think we should keep these numbers in perspective and know that over time, even, if our projections are too high, the money comes back to the district, and that this is a difficult thing for us to estimate every year, but it is a excellent plan. If we had been a district that just paid for health insurance last year, we would have had a premium. It would have been set for the entire year, and we would have just kept paying it, and we would not have recognized the benefit and reduced claims. So I don't know if we've ever tallied up how much we've saved by being self-insured, but I wanted to point that out.
I think we actually tallied. I think Joe actually looked at that last year, and the number I remember was, I think, 10 million or thereabouts over the past 4 or 5 years. It's a big number.
Right. So so even though this is an up, I don't think we should worry about it in this district. I think that this is a great benefit to New Canaan and the taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that briefly with Joe Penny. It's a great point that if we were fully insured, the money we're talking about would have all been profit to the insurance company.
Exactly.
So, and all the design changes we've done through the years with our negotiations and other work that's been done to improve the efficiency of this plan has really paid off. I have those slides from last year, that deck. If you'd be interested to see them again, I'd be glad to pull out those couple of slides and send them around.
Terrific.
So Brian, if you just go back to the top, if that works, great. So I just wanted to highlight the, if you sort of look at these buckets down through row 11, you can kind of see the major drivers. Their COVID, their internal services fund, their start and end times, and their, salaries, contractual salary increases. Everything else is actually a reduction. So the internal services fund, I view, my personal view is that's, kind of as Penny said, we have to do what makes sense from an actuarial standpoint, and adjust that and be, upfront with Board of Finance and Town Council, that we're gonna budget for what we need. So if that number improves over the course of the spring, then we'll bring it down. But that kind of is what it is. I think what you can see from the numbers that we put together and what Joe outlined is that our experience is actually largely consistent with expectations. And then, COVID and start time changes, are kind of self-explanatory. The last thing I note is, if you were to look at this instead, which the administration has and is detailed in the budget presentation on a kind of projected or cash basis for 2021, it very significantly skews the numbers, just because of the very significant COVID impact in the current year. So it's hard to compare things on that basis. When you're looking year to year from a COVID year to a at least partially non-COVID year.
Actually, Brendan, this is Carl. Let me jump in and expand on that point, because it's an important one. It's one I wrestled with a lot over the last couple of weeks. And, typically the approach that Dr. Keene takes is to use the currently projected numbers for the current fiscal year, just because they're the most fresh and have the most up-to-date figures to put into a base. That's always the right thing to do in a typical year. Unfortunately, this year obviously has not been typical, and so then when you go to the projected numbers, then you necessarily have to get into the exercise of what is the spending that is anomalous, COVID specific, and subtract that out, because it would not be spending that you need to have in a typical year. And then what is money that we budgeted to spend but then didn't have to spend, both in fiscal 20 and then again in 21, that we should add back to the base, because that's money would typically need to be spent in a normal year. And so you really get into all those puts and takes, and it just really complicates and muddies the analysis. And so I think it's much better to do actually what you do here, which is to just start with the adopted budget from last year, because that was, we didn't take any COVID into account. Obviously, we were aware of it towards the tail end of the budget process, but that did not make its way into the numbers, at all. So it's a much cleaner exercise, I think, to start this way. I did go through the analysis of trying to figure out all the puts and takes and add backs and subtracts. And interestingly enough, but not surprising, the number that you get on that projected number on a pro forma basis, so as excluding COVID, gets very close to that $90.9 $1 million base. And it's not too surprising. It's off by, a difference of a couple 100,000. So I just think it's easier. And in many ways, it gets us away from having to make the judgment calls as to, what's a pure COVID spend or savings.
Yeah, just the other thing to point out on that topic is, when you look at the COVID expenses in the 21-22 budget, it's a little bit less than the expected, projected savings in this year's budget, i.e. that we're likely to spend $1 million less than this top line here of $90.88 million, which you can kind of think of as, potentially rolling over to fund those COVID expenses in next year's budget.
Yeah, that is a good point. So I looked at that as well. And when you look at the unexpended amounts, which total about $3.1 million from last fiscal year and what we anticipate for this fiscal year, and then you look at unusual expenses that were incurred in the budget last year, this year, anticipated for next year, that 909, and plus some of the stuff that happened outside of the operating budget from the sustaining account. It washes, the COVID impact. It essentially washes. So it's what we didn't spend on certain things, we ended up spending on other things, kind of over the 3-year COVID impact period, based on kind of what we see today.
Julie.
Yeah, I think, Brendan, thank you for doing this. I think what it points out, and basically, I think Brendan, Carly, you were saying the same thing, is it crystallizes the fact that the changes in our budget, most of them are things over which we have no control. The salaries and benefits are baked in, internal services fund, COVID, like things that we are not able to decrease. And so even though our budgets go up year to year, the majority of that is not anything that we can change. And so we are as careful as we possibly can be with those things that, are making the budget go up. So thank you for doing this.
Sherry?
Yeah, I also just wanted to chime in. I agree, Brendan, this is really helpful for me personally. And I think it just makes so much sense to really focus in on the component parts and to really look at COVID, the ISF, the start time, and then the other. And really then when you look at the other change, which is what you're getting down to, and to really focus in that is all contractually based. And then I think there's a lot, looking at the reductions that we're not even really taking credit for some of the efficiencies that have been gained there. So I think that's a good thing. My question actually is on the COVID expense line. Just, I think, this is, I don't know if this is best case or if this number continues to evolve as we continue to hear more about, this new variant. And, if there's going to be a worst case of this pandemic going into 22 and even kind of the long-term, thinking about hygiene and custodial staff going forward, I think going forward, we're always going to think about it differently based on the pandemic experience. So I guess my question is more to the administration of, on the COVID expense line, if, we're really comfortable that that's, a full in number for what we'll need.
Thank you, Sherry. I'll start, and certainly anyone is welcome to jump in, Joanne or otherwise. But you're right. We're making, whenever you build a budget, you're doing your best to make itemized estimates for all of these things. And so, what we're looking at really is what it costs now, what the mitigation strategies we think we'll have to have in place, and the penetration of the vaccine and the anticipation that the vaccine is going to work with the variant. So we had some good news about that just recently today, where Moderna is looking at adapting their vaccine to make sure that it is flexible enough to be responsive with the variant. So we're putting in items in the budget that we think that we will need based on what we know today, with an understanding that if we do wind up needing more, that the Board of Finance has been good partners with us, and they've recognized the importance of the investments here, and that it's with their help and partnership really right from the beginning that helped us to get to where we are today. So I would anticipate that they continue to be good partners if it turns out to be more dire than we're predicting, and that the expenditure needs to be more. On the other side of that, I think that we have to plan for it to exist. We're still going to be responding to it in different ways. So we work to figure out what's the amount that we need to be confident that we'd be able to open our doors on day one, with it still in the environment, but hopefully to a different degree, right? So as the vaccines continue to penetrate, and the more and more people in the community and throughout the state and beyond, even really across the world, are able to get it, it should make a difference. So we're trying to strike that balance as an itemized estimate, but we have had good cooperation and partnership with the Board of Finance and other town boards. So that helps.
So one thing to let the board know is this budget does include, half a year support through the first semester for the current interventions that we have in place. So our custodial staff through to the end of January, the building subs through the end of January, through the first semester, and all the related expenses. So if there is not herd vaccination in place by winter of next year, we'll know it ahead of time and be able to plan forward with the boards in town. But it is a good point. I mean, we do have a new standard of cleaning, and we have to determine whether or not we can sustain that after this is behind us.
Penny? You're on mute, Penny.
Sorry, I hadn't heard anything about vaccinating children yet. And so, most of our school population, will not be vaccinated that I've heard of, at the start of the school year, or I'm not sure where that's going. How does that impact the need for the mitigation, the COVID expenses into the next school year? And what are the specialists saying about that?
So there are some studies that are being conducted now for folks 16 and over. I don't believe there's much going on below that. So it is something that we have to continue to take into account as far as social distancing goes and cohorting goes. We fully expect as we get into next year that we'll still periodically need to quarantine when there are positive cases, things like that. We have some positive news. I believe I saw an article today out of Israel where they've had significant vaccinations and of the Pfizer, I believe, and they're finding it to be even more efficacious than what they had expected. So I think that's a good sign, for us and for our teaching staff coming back in. But we anticipate the social distancing, the mitigation strategies, even the mask wearing will probably still be all be needed when we start up next year, and as we continue to get to a place where we figure out what comes next.
Great. Other questions or points on operating?
And of course,
only other thing I'd add is sorry to not raise my hand. The only other thing I'd add is I know in past years we've looked at how our per pupil expenditures compare to our DERG, and just given where our budget is this year, so that's the approved budget relative to other towns, we're now firmly in the lower portion of our DERG, so we're below most of the other districts from a per pupil expenditure standpoint. So we continue to do really well by that measure.
Right. Dr. Keating or Dr. Lister, anything else you wanted to add, or do we want to talk about capital?
We can, if you're comfortable, we can transition to capital, but we can come back to operating if questions come up along the way. But I know that Dan Clark is here to join us for discussion about capital and to be able to answer any questions as well. So why don't I find Dan over here, and here he is. I'll promote him over. I'm sorry, I'm going to move my dog who's eating his toy right here. I'll be right. This work from home stuff is tough. All right.
We need a Board of Ed mascot.
Yeah. There we go. Welcome, Dan.
Welcome. Thank you.
Of course, my dog followed me right back in the room with the same toy, so I'm going to have to figure out a new strategy on that one, too. Why don't we shift over to capital? If I know there was just some interest in learning just a little bit more about the planning with CHP and solar. Do we want to talk about that or anything else in particular? Are there any questions from the board? That anything and specifically you'd like us to go into a little more detail about? I'll be glad to. I'll share the document itself and jump to capital.
If you go down the tab, it's probably around 100, page 100, somewhere in that area.
103, 104.
Yeah, there we go. We could briefly go through each item here. It's a page and a half, and then take a pause after each section for questions and just highlight the big ticket items or the main goals that we have. So within this budget, we are proposing to re-roof the high school, and that is currently being developed. The specification is being developed right now and will be out on the street in February, and we do plan to have the bids back, vetted and prepared to provide the town council with a proposal with a number. It's going out in with two types of application. It's either going to be done all at once, which means that there will be re-roofing taking place during the school year, or the second option is going to be in a two-phase project over 2 summers. So we'll get the bids in, we'll analyze the options that we have, look at the pricing, and make a proposal to the town. Right now, we're looking at $3.5 million for each of 2 years. So the budget that's going before the town is assuming 2 phases. And this would be the first phase. Although in a conversation that Dan and I had with our designer last week, he told us that the pricing may come down, and it could come down significantly depending on how we actually stage each section of the roof, and there's many sections in the roof. So this will be an interesting process that we go through, and hopefully it will save us the same percentage of dollars that were saved on both south and east by the bidding strategies that we employed for both of those projects. And we came in between 20 and 25% below cost estimates based on how we staged it. So if you go up to the top, Ryan, that's the $100,000 that is there, is really to continue the engineering services into next year in addition to the roofing. So that supports the roofing project. General engineering is for, we have a boiler project going on at South and a few other projects that will require engineering services. And then you're going to see in here that we do have some CHP projects going on. So this is a typical engineering budget that we have, especially with the roof replacements in there at $100,000. If you go to East and the other schools, we are going to continue with our painting program that's been in place for several years now. It's been highly effective in terms of really chipping away at the areas that need to be freshened up within the schools. At East, we have the parking lot renovation project, which was deferred last year because of all the projects that were going on at that site, namely the roofing and the other exterior work to the facade. So we are at a place right now where we feel that the East parking lot is something that we do want to tackle. Tiger handles those projects for us. He's been very helpful. He goes out to bid with his own projects for the streets, and we kind of piggyback on them. So we're working, Dan is working with him in terms of resolving or getting that project priced out. The internal PA systems, the public address systems within the schools, were reviewed this past year, and these are prices that we did receive from our current vendor. And so West has been completed this current year, and East and South need to be completed next year. So you'll see fundings for that. Going over to South, the playground stair repair. This is for the staircase that goes from the upper level down to the playground in the lower level. And that's going to be tied in for a joint bid with the rear sidewalk courtyard repaving project that has been requested by the school. The bituminous that surrounds the school from the side around the back, that's an asphalt structure, is really decaying and breaking apart, and it's really a safety issue that needs to be addressed. The South School boiler replacement project has been on the books for a few years now. It's been on our 5-year capital plan. It was delayed last year, deferred, I believe, and this year it is at the end of its useful life. And the pricing in here is based on what we received for one boiler over at Saks. It's a similar type of plant rollout with a 2 boiler replacement. Saks happens to be 3, but we use that pricing for the budget. And again, you can see the PA upgrades there. When you get down to West, the painting is in that project, is in that school as well. Dan talked to Tiger today, and Tiger is feeling that this project to repave the parking lot at $300,000, which has been deferred for several years because of the anticipation of natural gas, is probably going to be deferred another year. So we talked about that today, and we're going to be requesting that the town do a significant patch job to that parking lot. It's really in desperate need to be brought up to a standard where it's not risky for people. Moving down.
Dr. Keating, can I just
Yes.
ask a question at West? Is the tank there now a propane tank, or is it an above ground oil tank? I just can't remember where we ended up with that system.
So we had to abandon the existing tank last summer because we could not get an extra year deferral from the EPA. So what we did was we worked with Country Day School, who had an above ground oil tank that was in place while they were doing their renovations, and we purchased it from them for $5,000 and had it set up for the year. So it is above ground right now.
That seems like a good deal.
Yeah, it was a good deal, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Dan kind of jumped through hoops to make it happen, to be honest with you. So kudos to him, because it was like a last minute, how do we make it happen kind of a thing. in the midst of everything else we were going through for COVID. So I just have to give him props for that. But so we can make it in another few years, no problem there. So, but the parking lot's the main issue for us, believe it or not. And we'll have to go from there. But if we do propane in, it's going to save us, maybe $10,000, $15,000. The total bill right now that for oil, based on our current pricing, is $40,000 a year to heat that building. So it's not a significant expense, and so we can delay, a decision on that without a problem.
Just to follow up on that, would the propane tank also go above ground, or would it go underground?
No, the plan right now is to bury it out in the front loop, beyond in the grass area, and pipe it over.
Okay.
Yeah. And that'll last, I think, if you recall the presentation by Mitchell a year or so ago, they said they last like 80 years. They just burn so clean. So it's much different than an oil tank.
Right.
So just as a reminder, at Saks, we had money in the budget for CHP that was under our budget originally. Then it went over to the town's side of the budget. And basically what we had presented last year was a CHP unit and one condensing boiler to replace a 3-boiler plant. What happened was, once we got into the study with OLA, who was the engineers on the project, they informed us that we really needed, in order to carry the proper load for the building, all 3 of the boilers within the building needed to be replaced with condensing boilers, and the savings would be significant. Furthermore, we learned that there's a significant refund or incentive from the utility company, up to 70% of the cost. It's formula based, but for the replacement of the boiler with a high condensing boiler. And we made the decision that that was the right way to go, and that the cogen, or the CHP, was a complement to the boiler plant. And so we broke it down into 2 phases. The first phase, which is in the current year's budget, is to put in a CHP and 1 condensing boiler. We went out to bid for the boilers, including all 3 boilers, but a 2-phase project. And so the first phase with the 1 boiler is currently in progress. The second phase, which would be in next year's budget, is this bid number right here, the 34734. And so that will complete the boiler plant at Saks, which is something that we desperately need to do. The second phase of the CHP would be to add on to the CHP that's currently being bid out right now. So that's been the plan all along, is to have the CHP plant expanded at Saks for next year. Now, the town has an advisory committee to the selectmen, and at its last meeting, the town's consultant proposed that we stay with the phase 1 at Saks for the CHP and transition that funding, or the concept of expanding CHP, to New Canaan High School. So that's something that's going to need to be studied over the next few months to determine where the best bang, or so to speak, or the best return is for that $400,000 investment. And we'll have to dig deeper into that. But he did say that through that meeting as well, that he wasn't suggesting, he was transitioning from putting solar on top of the high school more towards the CHP. And that's something that we heard for the first time. And we need to really study that much deeper before we can kind of settle in on the right pathway forward. Clearly, solar is the least costly and environmentally safe in terms of generating energy. So there's more to come on that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion as we go present this to the selectmen tomorrow morning, but I wanted the board to be aware of that in case they heard some conversation in town. So just moving down to the high school, we did have a very successful repaving project last year. It was the biggest part of the paving project at $750,000 or $775,000. And this would just be the second phase of that project. Again, we just talked about the roof and the painting.
Joanne, before we move on, I think Deanna had a question.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I understood correctly. So you're going to be reevaluating with your the CHP consultant or vendor or whatever as to whether or not we proceed at the high school first, or I guess the question I have is the 3.5 on the roof, because I know we talked about the, needing some special things on other roofs to accommodate solar, and I don't know this number, if it would be modified if we weren't going to be putting solar on top of the roof. So if you could just address that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, what happens when we call it a roof solar ready is we have engaged a structural engineer, and they study the structure and the materials that are in place on the roof. So there's a variety of different types of roofs. Dan knows far more about this than I do, so I would defer to him to speak to it. But there's roofs that are more suitable for solar panels with the weight than other roofs. And right now it appears that the southern end, which is over the gyms, will have a lot of real estate after we do some modifications to some of the skylights and so forth. And it has southern exposure to really generate a significant amount of solar. There is a long run back to the utility room, the mechanical room, but it does appear to be an ideal piece of real estate for solar. So we haven't abandoned the idea of putting solar up there. Like I said, it was just thrown out in a very short period of time at a meeting and without consulting with us. So we really want to dig into that. And as you know, when it comes to solar, there's zero capital outlay. It's a PPA. We don't have to put forward $400,000, $800,000, $1 million. We basically pay a bill, an electrical bill to the developer.
So I guess that, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I just want to make sure that, sort of in the speccing for the roof, that there aren't additional expenses associated with solar that we may abandon down the road. I guess that's because we don't need, because of this other option with the CHP or whatever. And so we put too much money in, an upscaled roof that we don't need because we've decided on an alternate solution.
Yeah, so what the structural engineer does is they take a look at the materials that are on the decking, and they say it can hold X amount of weight, or it can't. We're not going to tear off the roof to make it more stable, so to speak, for solar. The things that we do to make it solar ready is there's padding, there's different clippings and different things like that are, they cost $30,000 or $40,000, but you do them once the solar display or array is laid out. And then that dictates what you do in terms of making a roof solar ready. Okay. Am I saying that correctly, Dan?
Yes. So a lot of that work needs to be done as just part of the normal roof replacement. You replace the insulation and you replace any components to the roof structure itself that you find throughout the course of the project. And that's why we do it early in the process. And at the end of the process, when we're ready to design the roof, parameters are there. And then we know what's called the excess capacity, also taking in mind snow load and snow drifting, which is required to be able to meet code. So at the end, we know then what existing capacity is left over. And that's determined if that is enough to support solar array system.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? So if we were to do a cogen plant at the high school, that would coincide with, or this is a question, would that coincide with the boiler replacement there as well?
So the high school boilers are not scheduled to be replaced. I believe they were replaced in the renovation.
Mm-hmm. So does that make the economics of a cogen plant less attractive?
Not necessarily, no.
No, okay.
No,
okay.
It really is the load that you can push off to it.
Got it.
Electric load.
But is that the advantage to having it at Saks, because the boilers are already being replaced?
Well, there's two pluses at SACS. One is that we are having the boilers replaced, so we're going to have highly efficient boilers over there. So the energy that's being produced for heating is reduced. You know, the demand, the need is reduced. However, it does offset demand. And the two issues that we have, the two schools that we have issues with peak demand and ratchet charges, where like more than half of our bill is peak, is at the high school in SACS. So we're trying to use the cogens to mitigate both goals that we have: reduce heating, be more efficient with heating, but also bring those peak demand times down a bit by utilizing energy, electricity from the CHP. So I think the idea of putting a CHP is, you know, probably has a lot of merit, but I do think it needs to be studied. And I will also just add is the engineers that have worked on SACS, OLA, do believe that the school, there is a significant or a good payback at SACS for expanding the CHP to a phase 2. That's been their advice, the engineers who know that building.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So moving down, as we have in prior years, we're going to put in for 3 sped vehicle replacements. This will be the last replacement for the wheelchair van, and then we should be set with wheelchair vans for a while. And then the last piece here is the technology. We have consistently budgeted for $600,000 in spend, and that's what you'll see this year. You'll see the spend plan in the appendix. I think it's Appendix A.
Just on the vehicles, is this what we've budgeted historically, the $50,000? I just can't remember.
Yeah, for 3. Yeah, we've been doing 3. It's been the replacement cycle. It's a large fleet. I believe there's 22 or 24 vehicles.
Okay, thanks.
And there's just an explanation of everything as you go through it. And then you'll see also in the capital section a 5-year plan, which we do every year. And so you'll see we are in the cycle of boiler replacements with the exception of the high school in the 5-year. So you'll see east and west come up to in future years.
Joanne, sorry, I left my raised hand up, so I wasn't sure if Katrina
I'm sorry.
confused because I forgot to lower it. I noticed with the new internal public address system upgrades, you know, did something happen, or is there? I mean, you know, whenever there's a new fairly significant expense, you know, I'm always interested to understand what prompted it, because we do such a great job of planning out for 5 years.
I think it's, you know, and Dan, please add to this, but over the last several years, we've spent probably almost as much as we're asking for in capital and repairs. They're so outdated, and, you know, they're just so tired that they need to be updated. And it's, for us, it's a safety, you know, the PA system is our communication tool, safety. But Dan, you know, please add to that.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. The components were aging out in the field. After many, many years of broadcasting, and components loosen up, vibration and so forth. Some of the amplifiers are very old. So we thought it's time now to just go ahead and do it, as Joanne said, especially for safety's sake.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Penny.
If we're going to get a 70% reimbursement on the boiler, maybe you could talk a little bit about the timing of getting that. I don't know how that incentive is working. If that's an incentive that is potentially going to go away, should we consider bringing forward some of the other boiler replacements?
I mean, it's a good question, Penny. There's nothing is guaranteed. as these incentives do change and, take on new life and are bundled over time. So, but it is, I mean, maybe Dan, we've currently applied for the SACs, I believe. Is that correct?
We're in the process of completing
Applying
submitting
now.
the application. Correct.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's a direct incentive that comes back after, the way Eversource works with their incentive program is once you've completed and commissioned the project, they literally write you a check for whatever they agreed to give you. And so that would go right to the town and they would receive that as they have on the other projects.
I have a question on the West School parking lot. So where does the decision on natural gas factor into that parking lot? Because I know that has something to do with the oil tank replacement and, one thing leads to the other.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working with Tiger. We work with Tiger on all of the repaving projects. And Dan, I mean, maybe you can share what he communicated to you very recently.
Sure, I spoke with Tiger today. He's going to come up and take a look at it tomorrow for the same reason we spoke of. If we're not going to do a full replacement at this time, we should just look at the patching that's needed to make the walkway safe as people get out of their cars. There's been a lot of work on that driveway when the new water line was ran through there. There's a big patch for that. So we want to make sure that it's safe as long as we need it to be during the duration while we decide what we're going to do with natural gas or propane or whatever we're going to do. So we're going to be planning that right away to make sure that it's addressed at least temporarily, if not permanently, possibly next year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions on capital? Any other questions or comments on the budget? Let's see. Penny and Deanna, your hands are up, but I don't know if that's from before. Maybe it is.
Mine's new, but Penny can go first if she has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Deanna.
So I think two things. One, Joanne, I had this is kind of a nit on the late start time money, because as I went through and looked at the costs through, sort of the summary of the adds and subtracts to the budget that were highlighted, I saw the 46,318 and the 3,900 for the staffing, and then the 378,668 for the busing, which totaled 455,886. I'm guessing, but the number that we show in sort of the summary and in your summary, Brendan's summary page and the summary page that's in the budget is 463,337. Is that, I mean, that's more than just payroll taxes, because that's, our conversation this afternoon, I figured, like, based on last year, payroll taxes were about 5% of the costs. I don't know exactly what it is, but it was just, estimating. So can you just explain that variance, what's in that variance that's, between what's in the adds and subtract to the budget and the number that's in the summary?
Well, it should be exactly the same number. So let me take a look at that tomorrow and just confirm that something wasn't changed and didn't get moved over to the pluses and minuses of why the budget changed.
Okay. And then I guess, thank you. I appreciate that. And then I guess I just need to first address sort of the public comment that was made earlier, so that those who asked a specific question understand the answer to that question. And they are correct. There's been no change to the start times that were presented from last year. So the overall cost would be the same as last year, plus, Joanne, would it be like a 3.25% adder because of bus contract
Yes.
additions. That's how I figured it out earlier. So just so the public understands what that is. So, and I guess I needed to sort of first thank the administration for being so responsive to the board's goal this year of implementing, again, putting it in this year, implementing start times as part of the goals in our discussion. And in the conversations that I've been involved with, there's been a real commitment by the board to seeing start times being changed. That said, I have fairly strong reservations about a mid-year change for this coming budget year. There's a lot of uncertainty as to what next year is going to look like, where COVID's going to be, what our mitigation strategies are going to be, what the expenses associated with those mitigation strategies are going to be. And, so I think we've got a lot of uncertainty going into next year. And the idea of implementing a major initiative in the second semester of the school year, I think is, I worry, there was a comment, our administration can walk and chew gum. I think it minimizes the effort that is going to be needed to implement this change. And it's not just in the busing itself, it's going to be working with parents. There's strong opposition in this community, and there's going to be a lot of focus groups and talking. And I think we need to bring people around and be responsive to a lot of the concerns that have been expressed over the last year and a half, and getting people on board, particularly with our youngest learners, because it is a fair assumption. It is a fair comment that we've spent the least amount of time focusing on that part of our community. And I think they deserve our attention. I also think that, going into next year, we're going to have a lot of working parents who are really uncertain about their childcare needs going into next year. And the idea of, they don't, right now, most people don't even know what their work situation is going to look like. Are they going to be remote? Are they going to be at home? And then to have them have to change or look into childcare adjustments in possibly February, it's very difficult. I mean, I had conversations this weekend with pre-K program directors who have already told me their slots are full. It was very hard this year adjusting their staffing based on COVID mitigation. And, I think we really just need to be sensitive to all the moving parts in this community and what our adjustment can do to an entire ecosystem. And so, I think that it's smarter, and I think we'll have a better implementation if we really look to having a September rollout after we've had an opportunity to really kind of revisit with our elementary parents and probably our 5th, 6th parents, because they're going to have a major adjustment as well. So I think we need to spend some time on that. And then finally, for our teachers, changing childcare in February for teaching staff, you're going to have your elementary teachers, a 9:05 start to a 7:45 start is a significant change. That puts on big stressors on families, on, who's going to take care of their children so that they can get to work. And I think that is a more natural change over the summer. That's when most registrations occur. That's if you're in a group childcare situation. So I just think that we are putting our community in a really tough spot by looking at a mid-year implementation. And then finally, I really want our efforts of our administration, once we start to see the light out of these COVID, mitigation strategies, to be focused on what are the things we need to really address with our students that they may have lost over the last year and a half in being in this, different learning. We may be great, but most people that I've spoken with have said, they're going to be learning gaps that need to be addressed. And there's going to be focus needing to be made on attending to those learning and, educational gaps. And I don't want our administration's time and effort to be distracted from that, at the most critical time. So I support the effort, but I don't support the mid-year implementation. And so I would be looking to remove from this budget whatever the actual number is, the 463 or the 455 for start time changes.
Thank you, Deanna. Carl?
So actually, just switching topics back to the healthcare and the ISF. Brendan did a really good job of walking through that. There is some, unknowns, COVID unknowns as to kind of what the cost trend is going to be over the next year. And there really are kind of different ways to go in terms of, are we super conservative and put that large claim number in, or, take a different approach. I think we have some flexibility in that regard, in terms of relationship with the town and some of the insurance mitigations. And so I think that happy to, kind of leave it in as what it is, but there's, a good chance for some dialogue as we bring our additional partners in the Board of Finance and the Town Council to discuss kind of the numbers behind the ISF in a very fulsome way. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's a good point. Other comments? Jen?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Just quickly, Brennan, thank you again for doing that budget review. That was super helpful. So appreciate all the work you do. And so I just wanted to comment on what Deanna said. And I totally respect your opinion. And I know there are both sides to this. And, the decision that we make is always difficult because some people won't be happy and some people will be happy. Personally, I know that so much time and effort has gone into this effort and so much research and analysis, and we have gone to the community and we've been working on this for years. And, again, I don't think it's ideal to start mid-year, but I also think that we approved it last year. The majority of the board approved it. And we're in the middle of a pandemic and it's crazy. But ultimately, in our goals, we're trying to do what's best, what we think is best for the kids and what the research proves. And, I do think that if Dr. Lutzi and his team think that this, if he's not going to launch it successfully, it's not going to happen. But I know that they are confident that they can, and I do though, hopefully if this does pass, I do think that it would be great to have some type of a date, is there going to be a certain time frame where you're like, okay, yes, this is happening, or no, this is not happening. I don't know if, I don't even know what time frame we're looking at. Is it going to be January? Is it going to be February? Is it going to be March of 2022? But, just to give people some type of date to look at, if it is going to happen or if it's not. But I do think that it is the right thing. I fear that if it gets pulled out of the budget this year, that it's just never going to come back. And, again, we are in a pandemic and it may not be the ultimate time to launch this, but it is the right thing. And I think we should keep it in. But that's just my personal opinion.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, I also just want to comment on the start times. And I feel strongly, and I do, Deanna, I appreciate your concerns so much. I just feel strongly that as a board, we need to lead forward on this issue. And there's been a very lengthy and extensive and thoughtful process to get to where we're at now with the start times. And I actually believe that now more than ever, it's so important that we lead forward. I think all of the experts are sounding the alarm bells on the pandemic-related mental health issues that are emerging amongst our young people. And so therefore, I think a focus on sleep and student health and wellness is more important than ever. And I do believe that while it's complicated, I have full confidence in our administration that they can lead on this issue. I do believe that the proposal that has been put forward is aligned with when everyone learns best. I think it's aligned with the pediatric guidelines. It's aligned with science. And so for those reasons, I feel very strongly that we need to stand firm and support moving forward.
Thank you, Sherry. Julie?
Thanks, Katrina. And like Jen and Sherry said, I hear Deanna's concerns and the uncertainty, of course, is going to be with us for a while. I think what's important is that, as a board, that our job is to look out for what's best for our kids. And I think, especially during this pandemic, we've seen, brought into great relief how important the health and well-being of our students, are for them and for their success. And I think that, we, through all the work that we've done over the years, it's become clear that this is something that would greatly benefit our students, and change is hard, and there's never going to be an ideal time. And, it would be nice if things fit neatly into a school year calendar, but sometimes they don't. And I think this is one of those cases where, again, Dr. Lutzy and the cabinet have decided that the fall would be too difficult, but that they have confidence that it could be launched in the winter. And, like Jen, I think a definite date is really important, and that's something that we need to, to be fair to our parents, our teachers, we need to offer that up, as soon as we can. But I do believe this is something that we should keep in the budget.
Thank you, Julie. Bob?
Yeah, on the late start, I think in general, I like the idea. I've been pretty vocal. I definitely want to see the time get to like an 8 o'clock. I think for the younger kids, that is pretty early, and I know there's all kinds. I wasn't here for most of the for the work. I wasn't here for exactly most of it, but I do believe that making it a little later for the younger kids makes sense to me. I'm not sure about starting it in the wintertime when it's actually dark. It's you add those two things together. I don't think that's the best idea, but I 100% support the concept, but I don't really support that implementation in the current form. So if we can agree to tweak the times, I'd be all for it. So that's it on the late start.
Brendan, and then Penny.
Yeah, I echo some of the comments that were made. Definitely appreciate that it's not necessarily ideal to start in the middle of the year, but it's also our sort of budget to start of the school year is a really short budget approval to timeline to the start of the school year is also a really short time frame. So this actually gives us a little bit more time, gives parents a little bit more time to plan. But more importantly, this is something that the board, made a decision on last year. Unfortunately, the actions on the town side, forced us to pull it out, this current year. But it's a priority of ours, and particularly in the context of the pandemic, if we can get, an extra half or 2/3 of the year with kids waking up at all ages at times that are the best for their health and learning, then, we've done a service to all the kids in New Canaan. And undoubtedly there are going to be some significant challenges, in lots of different areas. But I think we're up to the task, as a community and as a district. So I support it, and more broadly support the budget.
Thank you, Brendan. Penny.
So I think that when we, if we include the change to the school start time in the budget with the part year implementation, it's only January 2021, so we have a lot of time to plan and to bring clarity to the details of it and provide a sufficient runway for the parents and the staff. And I'm confident in the ability of our talented administration to do that, or I don't think they'd have brought this proposal forward. We've been working on this as a board, for a long time. I don't know if it's 3 years or a little bit more now. It was unfortunate that the town council took this funding out last year, but I think that we have looked at it, and it's based upon the science and the research and what we feel is the best learning atmosphere for our students. The situation we have right now is by no means, I think, the best one that the school district can have, and so I fully support the administration's goal in putting this in and are moving forward with it.
Great. Thank you, Penny. Other comments? I would just add that, Carl, go ahead.
Sorry, unmuting myself. The only thing I'd add is that, and this kind of speaks to some of the comments that were made in the public comment section in the beginning. I don't want anyone to think that we haven't heard their voices and their concerns. And obviously those are real, and they're from a significant portion of the community. But I hope everyone recognizes that we've also listened to, there's quite a few voices of support. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of first principles and going back to what healthcare providers recommend, and so I just wanted to mention that, just to assure people that we're not being cavalier. Deanna has been a great and consistent voice for the in thinking about all the issues, and she's well respected on the board, and it's been a real benefit to have her in that role. And I think all of us have, struggled with the decision, and given it our, best faith effort to try to do the right thing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Thank you, Carl. I would agree with everything you said. These are hard decisions to make, especially in these times. And, I find, strength in the fact that we've done a lot of work. We've given this a lot of thought. We've had a lot of conversations. We've heard from the community. We know there are differences of opinion, and I value and respect those differences of opinion from our community members, from students, staff, and our board members as well. Personally, my view is that I fully support the plan that is in place. I think it's a question of timing, and we're faced with this, difficult challenge. I think there are still questions that need to be answered, and we still need to fill in the blanks. We're at least a year out from a potential implementation, and for those reasons, I would like to see us plan it forward and include it in the budget, and continue to think about the conversations and the work that we need to do to reassure and bring everybody along and move forward in that regard. So, and all of the other conversations we had tonight, I do fully support this year's budget. It's been a complex year. I look forward to having the dialogue and the conversations with the Board of Finance members and the Town Council. I think it's been very collaborative this year, and I really appreciate the time that the Board of Finance members have taken to, work with us and continue hopefully to work with us. And we'd like to bring in, the Town Council and do the same with them very soon. I think it's really important. And I think it just shows the power of, working together and having honest conversations and highlighting the challenges that we all face in our budget this year. So with that, I fully support and look forward to moving forward with the process after tonight. So thank you. And unless there's any other comments, I think we're ready to take a vote. Okay. So I move to approve as a second read and adopt the budget as the Board of Education proposed budget. All in favor? Please use your raise hand just to make it really clear. Okay, well, okay, opposed? Oh gosh, just raise your hand if you're opposed. Okay, so 1. All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate the time everyone took to review this budget. Thank you to Dr. Keating and Dr. Letzi and Tracy and the whole team. I know this was a tough budget to pull together, especially this year with everything else going on.
I just very briefly just want to say thank you to the board as well. Certainly thank you to the administrative team, to Tracy, to Dan, to Roy, to everyone who's been contributing to get us to this point. So this now, as you know, goes from being the superintendent's proposed budget to the Board of Education's proposed budget. And then, so tomorrow morning, we'll be meeting with the Board of Selectmen starting at, I think, around 8:30. They've got a little bit of business to do before that, but then I believe we're first up at 8:30. We will give a quick overview of the operating, and Brendan, we may actually use the exhibit that you walked us through tonight or something like that, and we'll go through very quickly, and then we get into capital because Board of Selectmen that board focuses on capital specifically, so we'll be talking that through. If any board member would like to join us, so sometimes people do when they're free, certainly let me know. I can send you the link, or just make sure that you can be a part of that conversation. And then we will go to the Board of Finance a week later to continue on. So we will, although it's the Board of Education or Board of Education's budget, we will continue our advocacy of that. And you'll have the schedule in advance, and you're certainly welcome to join us along the way whenever you're available. And
Brian, could you just send those links for every meeting? Because I think,
it's a good idea.
Yeah, just so if we can make it, we can make it. But if we can't, we can't. But as long as we have the link, then we can.
Yeah, you just click it, even if you just come for a time. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to forward them. I have it, and I meant to forward it earlier, and I didn't, but I will. I
Great. If you'll do that, Katrina, then I'll have Jacqueline do it for all the other meetings going forward, just to be consistent. Perfect.
Yep, will do. Thank you. Okay, Carl, you have a hand raised. Is that intentional?
I do. Yeah, it is intentional. Actually, as we move to the conversations with the Board of Finance and with and the Town Council and First Selectmen, it echoes a comment I made earlier. I really think that it would be much clearer this year if we use the adopted budget from last year, and in particular when we're looking at the 8 objects and how they change from current to our newly adopted budget, to see those. I think it's going to be easier to see the progression across those objects in that way. Or another way to do it would be to put the projected in based on the current experience, but also show the budgeted, so people have an idea as to where the projected is relative to the adopted budget directionally. So they kind of that'll give a little bit of insight into the COVID impact. I just think it's important to try to present things as simply as possible, so that people are clear on what's going on.
Thank you. I think that's excellent feedback. Because as we spoke earlier, we budgeted to run our full program this year, but now we've had to scale that program back. So it looks like an increase just to get back to where our program was on a just move forward basis, whether it's athletics, co-curriculars, all kinds of things. So using the budgeted in this one instance, usually it's projected, and that's, makes good sense. And we spend a lot of time doing those projections, but in this instance, given the disruption, I think it's a more accurate comparison, Carl. So thank you.
All right. Any comments from the public? Move back. See if you could please raise your hand. Anybody would like to speak?
Sorry, I believe Jennifer was the first, so I will.
Thank you again for this opportunity. I guess I'm not surprised, though highly disappointed. Though the tone of the board has somewhat changed, at least acknowledging those of us that have had concerns, though not supporting a start time change, just a healthy one that represents all students. Pediatric guidelines call for 10 to 12 hours of sleep for our youngest through to 5th and 6th grade. That would require our children going to bed at 6 p.m. That is not possible. You know it. I know it. I don't want to hear they get up early. Come to my house. You'll see my daughter who gets up at 8. 10 to 12 hours. That is the science. You are talking about science, and yet you ignore it. I don't understand. I'm not the only one. So in an effort of involving the community, in an effort of really saying that you're for the health and well-being of all of our children, forgetting the complexities, somebody please address this to all of us. Secondly, the cost of childcare and how hard it is to get is impossible in this town. And quite frankly, you have people losing their jobs right and left. This is not affecting others. It is affecting our community. And you're asking families now at a time when, quite frankly, there's more hurt to come to set aside tens of thousands of dollars in potential childcare when nobody knows what's going to happen. We are a dual working family, and I'm busting my butt to find a new job for a stable company who couldn't make it. I am not the only one. We deserve the sensitivity. We deserve the attention. This was a big deal when this wasn't an issue. And this proves to be a case. And I'm so saddened. I'm shaking. You can't even see me. All of our children deserve this. And I know you say you hear us, but you can't possibly. If you're limiting their ability for after school in 5th and 6th grade, some children not getting home till 5 o'clock, you're limiting their sleep by not allowing 10 to 12 hours. And you're putting additional incredible mental challenges, financial challenges on folks in our community who, quite frankly, don't deserve and don't need the extra added pressure. So thank you, Deanna, for speaking for all of us on that front. The time is not the same as it was a year ago. There are new challenges, and I hope you take that all into effect. And again, thank you, Mr. Naughton. You've been a great supporter as well of being in the dark. A child got hit this year with a car on the way to school in the dark. We had ridiculous fights. So anyway, thank you. I'm hoping we can find a good solution. This is not it. It's very disappointing.
James, okay, James, you.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. It's hard to follow that impassioned plea up. And I mean, I think you hear it in her voice. You hear from a number of parents that they would like another alternative. You say you listen to the parents, you listen to the community, you want a solution that helps others. But since this plan first came out, this schedule first came out in the beginning of January, I would like someone to tell me if that plan has changed at all. If you've taken the voices of numerous parents into consideration, what have you done to address it? If you're just going to push the same exact plan through, I don't know how you can honestly say that you're concerned about our feelings, our thoughts, our predicaments, our children. You say you are, but those actions don't seem like they are because, frankly, from a year ago, you've done nothing to this plan other than continue to push it forward as is. And I think that's what's truly frustrating numerous parents. You say you're listening, but it doesn't seem like you're listening if you look at what you're doing. If someone can tell me how the plan has changed, acknowledging the voices of numerous parents in the community, then I'd like to hear how your plan has changed. I think I'm just frustrated by this whole process, frustrated by, I guess, it just seems somewhat disingenuous to say you're listening when you have the exact same plan you had. I think that's it. I want to end off also by thanking the administration for the work they've done in COVID. I know that it's been a real bear, and to throw this on top, I don't even know how that helps, but I appreciate all your efforts. And I'd rather have the money go to bonuses for the administration than for this, because this is actually doing damage. I honestly believe it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Other comments? Okay.
All right. Dr. Lutz, announcements and future business.
Just very briefly, we do have a meeting in a week. Thank you for moving these meetings in January. As you'll recall, we moved them off a week so that we could capture the week after the holidays. So at that meeting, we will be able to give some feedback on the meeting with the Board of Selectmen tomorrow morning. And Principal Cascat from South School is coming to share an update on South School and a couple of pictures about what's going on there. So we get a window into the elementary. And you may have read, I hope, that we have identified and hired a new assistant principal over at South Elementary School. So Zoe Robinson is our new assistant principal. She's been with us for quite some time as our K-8 math specialist, yes. And we'll have her say hi to the board at a later date. I don't want to commit her without speaking with her first, but make sure she has an opportunity to do that. And of course, many of you know her well, both as parents and board members, as she's shared different presentations with us. So Matt and Zoe are excited to get going as a team. And there we have it.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Zoe. Congratulations. All right. Motion to adjourn. Sherry, second. Jen, all in favor? All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.